It's time for that little podcast down in Texas, the Tea Party Power Hour with Mark Galar.
Welcome to the Tea Party Power Hour. I am your host, Mark Galar. Today, I'm very excited to have Mr. Bruce Fleming with us. He has taught at the U.S. Naval Academy since 1987 and is the author of over 20 books, including his most recent one, Saving Our Service Academies, My Battle with and for the U.S. Naval Academy to Make Thinking Officers. Bruce, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Appreciate being here.
As I was telling you off air, I specialize in bringing in people who aren't afraid to take on authority, and I would argue that anybody who teaches at the Naval Academy and is not afraid to write an article critiquing the Naval Academy falls into the category of the type of badass guest that we're looking for. I mean, they can't stop you. I mean, you had a heart attack and you just kept going. It was amazing. But let's get serious for a second and just say that the service academies were created a long time ago. And the world has changed since then. The service academies have changed somewhat, if you count all the DEI stuff and wokeism that's crept in. But when you look at our service academies, and I guess we can go ahead and throw in the Air Force Academy in there as well, what do you see as being the major problems that need to be corrected?
Well, some of them I'm not sure can be corrected, which is the unfortunate truth, but some probably can. To go back to where you were just a second ago, the world has changed and the service academies have changed, and moreover, our military has changed, and along with that, the nature of American military intervention. I mean, let's put on the table that the United States hasn't actually won a war since World War II. So it's the military.
Wait. You're forgetting Kuwait.
You know what? I put that in there. I even had to go back and send the editor. I said, wait, I forgot the 100 hours in Kuwait.
Absolutely.
But that is actually in the book. You're right.
I know it is, and that's why I brought it up.
Okay, so let me talk about the way that the world has changed. Back in the day, I'm talking about World War II and just the years after that, the service academies were just about the only way. Of course, Air Force didn't even exist because Air Force was part of Army, but the service academies were just about the only way you could become an officer. There was ROTC, but it was pretty vestigial. So the first thing that's changed is that ROTC has beefed up and Officer Candidate School has beefed up. I mean, a lot. So the result is that fewer than one in 5 officers comes from any of the service academies. That's true of Annapolis. That's true of West Point. Let's just focus on those. So they produce a much smaller proportion. And there's no evidence. These officers are wildly more expensive to taxpayers. I mean, let's be clear. These are taxpayer-supported institutions, 100%. And they're wildly more expensive. Each one of these 1 in 5 officers wildly more expensive. They cost about $500,000, which is 4 times what the average ROTC officer costs and 8 times what an OCS officer costs. So we can get the same quality. There's no for much cheaper. So what do they? It's the world that's changed outside of them, but they've changed too, and now we need to get to that. It was all male until 1970. All the service academies were all male until 1976. Of course, Congress, they all resisted having women. The Congress said, you're going to have women. Okay, fine, we have women. The women were treated horribly for a long time. I could even say decades. I mean, I've talked to women from those early classes, and the stories are just hair-raising. There were no accommodations made at all for plopping a bunch of women into an all-male kind of stronghold. So, but now the pendulum has swung way too far in the opposite direction. I see 3 basic waves of social engineering at Annapolis. The first I was aware of when I came in and got very aware of when I served on the admissions board, and that is our race-based admissions standards. Now, probably everyone's aware that the Supreme Court outlawed race-based admission for last summer for civilian universities, but they went out of their way. Chief Justice Roberts went out of his way to put a footnote that said this does not apply to the service academy, so they can continue doing what they're doing. However, when I was on the admissions board, it was subsequent to the 2003 Supreme Court decision that Sandra Day O'Connor is associated with. And that made it clear that, yes, you could consider race, but it was to be sort of a tiebreaker among equally adept candidates for whatever. That was not the case when I was on the admissions board. And I started writing articles about it. To be clear, we have it's two tracks. If an applicant self-identifies as one of what I call the protected minorities, and African-American, Hispanic, American Indian, and since my time, they've added Asian, which is interesting because they couldn't get enough of the others, so that they can beat their chest and say, look, we had this huge minority quotient. But it was to a much lower standards. I mean, I can put numbers on it, but it was to a much lower standard. And there's also an asterisk that maybe your listeners don't know about, and that is that each of the service academies has a prep school that taxpayers also pay for, and that is also part of the military. I mean, let me say, this is not an aside, but I need to shove it in right here.
Do it.
All the students at the service academies are members of the military. They're members of the military. They're not like ROTC students, but they're actually in the military. And that is also true of the prep schools. So that becomes relevant in just a second, and I'll come back to that. So I objected to that. What they were doing was illegal. It was two-track admissions and so on. The administration didn't like that a bit. So that was round one. And that was an angry letter from a 2-page letter that said it wasn't professional for a professor to write an article in, I think it was Proceedings at the U.S. Naval Institute, hardly a hard left publication. But that was the thin edge of the wedge. It got worse over the next 15 years. They upped the ante every time as they figured out what they were doing wrong. They slapped me with 2 official letters of reprimand, which put me on probation for 2 years, as in don't dare move for the next 2 years or we're going to fire you. I was denied pay raises. I was subjected to I would like to say countless, but actually I can count them, probably 4 endless so-called investigations whose purpose was to harass me and so on. So that was the beginning of the problems. The second wave of problems came when the Obama era, the use of Title IX in the Obama era, told all institutions that in the case, it was a sexual harassment, sexual assault guidance. And it said that if the woman says that the man, even after the fact, maybe months after the fact in this case being what the man may well have thought was consensual sex, if she says, no, I was actually forced, or I didn't want to say that I didn't want it because blah, 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 that she is supposed to accuse him of sexual assault, not just sexual harassment, but sexual assault. And I objected to that in print and in the classroom, and 2 female students took me on, and the result was 2 investigations into what this, really dangerous Professor Fleming was doing in the classroom. And then the last iteration is what you've already mentioned, the so-called DEI stuff, the diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what that really means is press to hire non-white, non-straight, faculty members, creation of courses, some of which are now mandatory. The English department has a mandatory diversity course, for example. We're in the process of changing what used to be a Shakespeare requirement into an either or, where Shakespeare is one of 2 options and the other option is a, quote, diverse author, i.e. non-white, non-male. And the students are okay, let me go back to what I said I was going to come back to, that the students, the midshipmen, they're called midshipmen because, I'm not sure if people know this, because the Naval Academy was founded in 1845 to give shore training for what used to be the guys, young guys, teenagers usually, who served as apprentices on they were sailing ships, of course, at that time. So they shimmied up into the rigging, and they were amidships. So they were midshipmen. They were the kids, the teenagers. Anyway, we call them midshipmen. The midshipmen at West Point, they're called cadets, also at Air Force. The midshipmen and the cadets, all the service academy students, are in the military, which means that they're subject to the UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice. In my case, I'm a civilian faculty member, as indeed most of the faculty at Annapolis are. I have a PhD from Vanderbilt, 1982. I went to Haverford College, University of Chicago, master's degree. And they tried to apply UCMJ to me as well. That's another sub-story, read the book, which is why they lost. I was fired in 2018. They finally, threw a Hail Mary, they said, we're sick of this guy. We're going to get rid of him. They tried, as I say, this increasing scale of punishments, and they fired me. And that was the same week that I had this heart attack. I was reinstated less than a year later, by a judge, retroactively. So legally, I've never been fired. And that the result is that I got to write this book. But being subject to the UCMJ means that these basically three waves of political, what we used to call political correctness, the culture wars, that have been imposed, they're hard left impositions. I mean, let's be clear about that. And the paradox of the service academies is that they're imposed on a really conservative base. So the students come in, a lot of the students, the male students, expecting one thing, and they get an entirely different thing. But if they object, they get slapped with UCMJ punishments. Not just, a civilian university can, at its extremes, can throw you out. But you have recourse, and you can take them on in federal court. Students at the service academies cannot. They just have to keep their mouths shut and tolerate this stuff. So that, to me, is the largest issue. I mean, here's a metaphor that I like is, we're on what's called the Severn River. It's an offshoot of the Chesapeake Bay. In fact, it's in our school, in our school song, Navy Blue and Gold, where the Severn meets the tide. You drop a pebble in the Severn River, and of course you get concentric circles, ripples coming out from that. So at the center of my particular pebble is, well, obviously me, but the service academies. But beyond that, we have problems. The next ripple out is the military, and the ripple beyond that is our society at large. So let me focus on the military. What the academy did to me, this is not poor little me. I absolutely 400% refuse ever to self-identify as a victim. I am not a victim. I am a fighter. But they went after me, and that's bad, not just because it's me and it's my heart attack and it's my, waking up at 2 a.m. with my fists clenched and furious at them night after night. That's me. But the larger issue is that the military is squelching what the Brits call loyal opposition. I wrote an article about this, again, for the Proceedings of the Naval Institute, called Loyal Opposition Isn't Disloyal. You need people who actually know what's going on the ground to be able to tell the higher ups what is going on. And that is completely shut down. I'm the living proof. What they tried to do was to shut down somebody. I've taught between 3,000 and 4,000 students. Hundreds of them have sat in the big red chair in my office and, told me their life stories and bitched about the Naval Academy, which they're all disillusioned with, incidentally. There are very few true believers left at the Naval Academy, or indeed any academies. I've talked to West Point kids. I've talked to West Point professors and so on. So by squelching dissent, you're making the military less effective. And to come back to our point, we shouldn't have been in Afghanistan to begin with. Okay, it's civilians, thank God, knock on wood. We will continue this way. We have civilian control of the military in this country. There are countries where that's not true. Thailand, Egypt, and so on. We don't want to be like those countries. We want civilian control. But the military is not powerless. It needs to be able to talk back to its civilian masters. And within the ranks, the brass have got to listen to the guys on the ground. I mean, I'm the one who actually interfaces with students and knows what's going on. The brass know nothing. There's a joke, close to nothing. There's a joke that says, once you become admiral, you'll never eat a bad meal again or ever hear the truth. And the first is because, it's a highly paid job and it's sir or ma'am this. Now we're about to, maybe tomorrow is the day that, what's today, the 11th? Mm-hmm. Today is the day that the new superintendent of the Naval Academy takes charge. Maybe she's already done it. It's a she, the first woman we've ever had. So it's a sir or a ma'am. You're not going to eat a bad meal because you have wait staff, but you're also not going to hear the truth because there are so many layers of buffers and a culture in the military, which I experienced personally. The Service Academy stands in here for the larger Navy, what we call Big Navy, a culture where people who actually know what's going on are shut down and cannot break through the buffers to the brass. No superintendent ever called me in and said, hey, Professor Fleming, what are you seeing? Or what's up with this? Or maybe, no, never. It was all slap him with another letter of reprimand. Okay, fine, I can take it. I'm a big guy and I'm just going to write another article, or in this case, a book. But they are denying themselves at the very least, useful information. Now, transfer that to the military. You've got some grizzled enlisted Marine. He's in a forward operating base. He actually sees what's going on. What do you think the chances are that what he knows is ever going to filter up to the brass? It's very small indeed in the current culture that we have. So that has got to change. Yes, I have a solution for this. We have to, instead of this be ass kissing up the ranks, which is what we currently have, we have to have, remember, I'm a professor, I'm a PhD professor, so I believe in discussion. Mm-hmm. And, you bring up it got to be a joke in my class where, we're looking at poems, right? A lot of people say, well, what does poetry have to do with being an officer? I have an answer to that, believe me. The first answer is that when you say to they have to read it for class. I tell them, read it 3 times. They come in, I say, okay, what's this poem about? They will come up with the craziest damn stuff. Sometimes I say, where is that? What justify? The joke is that I got to be a broken record. Justify your assertion. Justify your assertion. Where is that in the data that you see? And it turns out that, 9 times out of 10, they're just pulling it out of what. They're just saying what they want to say. They're not paying attention. And I can show them that they actually have to justify their assertion. Now, that is not just how to read a poem. It's a life skill, obviously, but it's also essential to the military. Because these are all going to be officers, remember. Officers are 10% of the military. 90% are enlisted. Might be your kids. I have 2 college-age sons, might be my kids. And they depend on the officers to protect them. The job of the officers is to serve their people and to accomplish the mission. Some people like to say, the military, it kills people and breaks things. And all that's true as well. But you have to look after your people. And the way you do that is to be aware of what's happening. You can't just go with your, what you want to be happening. You have to look at the situation. Let's say you're in a battle situation. You have to be aware of what's happening around you. So you have to justify what you do. I say, yes, what I want is thinking. Look at the subtitle of my book, Thinking Officers. You can't just be dumb beef. You got to be beef. You got to have the strength, but you want to be smart beef. You want to be thinking officers, all right? So I can teach that in a classroom with a poem. And I can teach them by my example. Again, it sounds like I'm beating my chest, and I will. I'm going to beat my chest. I've had students who say, sir, I've learned more from you, that is to say, Dr. Bruce Fleming, about leadership than from anyone else at this institution. And damn, is that a compliment? That is huge. So That's real leadership. Real leadership is not what the brass typically do. I mean, I've been through more than a dozen superintendents. Let's hope that the new superintendent is different. There was one exception in the 90s. We had a guy named Ryan who was rational, and he did not come in and preen in front of the students. And he said, hey, I'm out of my element here. Let's see what you people have to give me. I mean, that's the way to come into a new situation. And let's be clear, every superintendent is coming into a completely alien situation. A Navy admiral doesn't know squat about running what's supposed to be a college, not squat. So they have two options. They can either fake it and raise their voice and pound the table, which is what most of them do, or they can say, ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to be here with you. This is a great privilege. Tell me what I need to do to help you do your jobs. I mean, that's leadership, all right? And we just don't get it.
Bruce,
and increasingly,
give me 1 sec. I want to play devil's advocate for a moment. You said you want to create thinking officers. As you were saying that, I could just hear some old seasoned veteran saying, when you're in a battle situation and someone gives you an order, you've got to follow it. If you take time to think, you could be dead. I mean, we can't have orders going out and every single troop deciding for themselves whether or not it's a good order and maybe there's a better way to do it. I mean, have you ever caught any response like that?
well, the old farts typically like me
Oh, okay.
because I'm saying, look, you got to go back to I'm a true believer in the Service Academy's mission, not in their reality. But you've made my point for me if that's not demeaning for me to say, because you're talking about the officers versus the enlisted. Remember, thinking officers. The officers are the ones who give the orders.
Correct.
So they're the ones who have to, and you're darn right. Absolutely. The enlisted, they just got to do it. I mean, they're tools. Junior officers are also tools, and, mid-level officers are tools of the people above them. Everybody's a tool, except for the one at the very top. But the thinking officer has got precisely, that was my point. He or she has got to be the one to, you can't think in battle, all right? You have to, it's like going to the gym to get huge, all right? You go to the gym and get huge. The gym is a fake situation. So that in a position where you've got to turn a car over, 5 guys can turn a car over, 4 guys can you can do it, right? So the same thing is true of where the service academies are laboratories. They're weight rooms. So my job is to show them how to do it, so that when they get in a pressure situation where you are absolutely right, they can't, scratch their heads and say, gee, let me think about what would Professor Fleming say? No, their muscle memory has got to be to the point where they know how to do it. And are they always going to get it right? No, but they're going to be stronger when they go into that situation. So that's what the service academies are supposed to do, but actually they're not doing that at all. I mean, I can control my tiny little world, and my tiny little world is 3 classes every semester of about 20 guys and gals. But the administration doesn't listen to me, and it wants to shut me down. And I can talk to the students in my office, and what invariably happens is they come in to talk about their paper, which was crappy and got a bad grade. I'm a notoriously low grader, incidentally, at least initially. I show them how to make it better, but I say, look, you have not made your point here, so let's do this again. They'll come in to talk about their bad paper, and then there's still a few minutes, and they open up about what they're thinking. And what they're thinking almost inevitably is how disappointed and disillusioned they are. So these places are hugely, as I said, hugely expensive. I say they're the vanity projects of the military brass. We don't need them because they produce way fewer officers than they used to, and they disillusion the students. So it's a rare midshipman or cadet who's more enthusiastic about military service when they leave than when they come in. I see that every year. I call it the October surprise, because they come in, they had their plebe summer, and they figure out by about October, which is only 2-3 months, that the place is not at all what they were led to believe. And they're told that they're supposed to idolize the first class, the upper class. It goes in reverse order for us. Fourth class is plebes, the freshmen. Third class, second class, and first class. They're told to idolize the first class, but the freshmen say, I mean, I'll never forget one woman said one day in class, "Sir, are we going to," they say sir a lot. I tell them they don't need to say sir to me all the time, just, once or twice a period does it. But they say it because they've been taught. She said, "Sir, are we fated to become what our first, they call them firsties, what our firsties are?" And I took a deep breath and I sighed and I said, what I was thinking was, I'm afraid so. But that's not what I said, of course. What I said was, not if you keep your wits about you and stay true to the values that you brought in. The firsties are just disillusioned. I mean, they were nice kids in their time too. They came in, hoorah, and they discovered all the things we're talking about. They discovered that race was a determinative factor in leadership positions. They discovered that the man was assumed to be guilty. Oh, let me throw on the board. Now we have close to about 40% women. We have the out gays are permitted, of course, as opposed to 1976, where it was all male and there were no out gays. I'm sure there were some not out gays, but all sex and hand holding on up is forbidden on our 338 acres. So they all live in one dormitory. There's almost as many girls as boys. How likely is it that they're not going to be having sex? Of course they're having sex.
I would hope so.
Well, I would hope so. But that's my point about the Service Academy. You said we started off by saying what's changed in the world. The world outside has changed. The Service Academies want to be hip. They want all these culture war things. They are hip in other ways as well. We didn't used to even give a bachelor's degree until the 1930s. We didn't have majors until the 1960s. So now everybody gets a Bachelor of Science. You can be this is funny. You can be an English major. There are 5 non-technical majors. I think there are 5. English, history, social sciences, something else, economics. But you get a Bachelor of Science degree when you graduate. So at the plus side here, let me be positive for a second, because it never hurts to be positive. Our institutions are one of the few places where you can be an English major and not flip burgers when you get out, because you're going to be commissioned to do the same job as anybody else. So that's the good news. I mean, that's been fun for me to be able to be in that situation. But the service academies want to be hip, and they want to do all these things. It's not just what they want. Congress has wants too, like women, where Congress is imposition. But at the same time, they want to keep the pot. They've created a situation that's untenable, because they keep the pot on the boiling. They keep the top on the boiling pot stronger and stronger and stronger. Like instead of just doing what they ought to do, which is to say, okay, we give up, as long as you're not inconveniencing your roommate, or as they said, scaring the horses, you can, sure, I mean, whatever, that's your own time. Show up at 0800 or dark 100 or whatever 100, clean, for the boys shaven, in a uniform that will pass inspection, and we don't care what you do.
Let me ask you a quick question, Bruce. Have you actually openly told one of your classes, I think you should be able to have sex here at the
Naval? Absolutely.
And was it met with enormous applause?
It was met with enormous applause, except there were naysayers. And the way it worked out with my firing was, they figured out that they couldn't. They tried initially to punish me for what I wrote, and the Office of Special Counsel interceded on my behalf. They tried to punish me for what I said in class, and that didn't go so well. So finally, they found one kid who was annoyed. This was what got me fired. I had a fall semester. He was a plebe, and he wanted an A in the class. And in fact, he got a C. He knew he was going to get a C because I give interim grades all along the course, the way as the course is playing out during the course. But he got a C, and he went home and he told mom and dad, about the things that Professor Fleming was saying, including exactly that, oh, for God's sake, sex is your own business. You can't combine these two paradigms of, we want to be with the times and we want to, keep the top on the boiling pot. And that was one of the complaints. He wrote a 16-page complaint letter alleging all sorts of crazy stuff, none of which were upheld by the judge. I mean, every single one of them was knocked out of court by the judge.
May I ask a quick question? Sure.
He didn't like it. He didn't like it.
Was he the least bit offended? Because you used the word offended in the book, and you said that comes up a lot there at Annapolis. Was he the
uncomfortable?
Uncomfortable. I'm sorry.
Uncomfortable.
Was he
uncomfortable?
Uncomfortable. Was he the least bit uncomfortable about things like queering of the Renaissance or queer communities in film and literature? Did that make this person uncomfortable?
Well, I don't know, because that was 5 years ago now, and he graduated before that happened.
Oh, okay.
But that's my earlier point. There are, they get so much stuff shoved down their throats that they just kind of roll their eyes and stand there, or they don't even roll their eyes because that's punishable. They just stand there and take it, right? So I know from talking with the students that all of this is intolerable. That's what I mean by they come in to talk about their paper, fine, and then they talk about what's really bothering them. Of course, there are students that it's not that this stuff is available. I mean, let me be absolutely frank about this. I had a gay brother who died of AIDS. So I don't know, what you do, who you're having sex with is your business. I'm not about to I grew up with a person, I'm just going to say a person, who underwent sex change surgery, what we now call gender affirmation surgery. And I'm here to say that was the right choice for that person. I mean, culturally, I come from a liberal background, but I do not believe in forcing stuff down people's throats. I mean, one of the nicer blurbs on the back of the book, I don't know if you saw it, is from a former student of mine from the class of 1990. That was a great class, and I'm still in contact with a number of those guys. In fact, I think I can say this publicly. One of that group has just, his name is Fred Kacher, and he was the interim superintendent of the Naval Academy until the new admiral, the female admiral, comes on. I think that I can say that because today's the 11th, and I think that the change of command ceremony has already happened. So he was one of those group, and I saw him at what's called the Military Bowl, the Tulane Virginia Tech football game in our stadium, and I went down and shook his hand and told him how great it was to see him again. I don't think he has a clue about any of this, but the superintendents, they just, well, I don't want to get off on the superintendents. The kids, they had this stuff shoved down their throats so that they just take it. I think it's great that it's offered. Not 2 out of 3, the queering of something. I mean, you can have, I think it's great. Look, I speak 5 languages. I've taught in India. I taught for 2 years at the National University of Rwanda, which incidentally is a completely black country. My students were black. The president of the country was black. So I am totally in favor of inclusion. And I'm totally in favor of diversity, but not as a forced thing. And that's what we now have. If the students, of course, there are students who are uncomfortable with this stuff, but they can't object. They can't object. That's my point. The UCMJ is used to if they want to discuss it, that's not permitted. It's just, these are the orders. This is what we're doing. Suck it up, as we say. So
with all the articles you've written and all of the speaking out that you've done, what would you say is your biggest victory? I know you were reinstated, but what would you say your biggest victory has been in terms of affecting change?
Oh, gosh, it's the human contact with the students. I just love midshipmen. I mean, God, who wouldn't get a pump? I mean, I'm going to be 70 this year, and I was doing one-arm push-ups for them until I was fired. I mean, who wouldn't get a pump out of being able to interface with and interact with a bunch of motivated, at least initially motivated, 18 to 21-year-olds. I mean, they come in, they still believe in duty, honor, country. They're just nice kids, most of them. I mean, the little fill in the blank that took me on, or the two women that reported me to the woman and to the officer in charge of sexual harassment. They were going to try to slap me with a sexual harassment charge because I was talking about a poem again. I can go into that's in the book. Read the book. It's a poem about King Kong. I love this poem. My biggest victory has been, I mean, I had 30 years of not uninterrupted bliss with the students. I mean, I just loved it. I loved it. And, I mean, I'd say, hey, love you guys. And sometimes, they're not kissing my ass and they say, hey, sir, we love you too. My God, is that valorizing or what? Yeah. So that's been my biggest victory. That's been my biggest victory.
You made several comparisons between the Naval Academy and Disneyland. Explain to my listeners what you meant by that.
They're beautiful for tourists, and they're made for tourists. As I say, I mean, I've gone through, our conversation has touched on a number of the ways in which I think that they're not only at the lowest level, not necessary, one level up, ineffective, a level above that or below that, I guess. They're actually demotivating to the students, but they are great tourist, I won't say tourist traps, they're tourist attractions. Of course, Annapolis is the biggest tourist attraction of all, because West Point, if you've been up there, you got to drive, an hour north of New York City, and there's nothing around it. It's beautiful. It's on the Hudson. I think its buildings are ugly. But it's Annapolis. I mean, we're the capital of the state of Maryland. We're 45 minutes from Washington. We get a lot of tourists. So it's Disneyland in the sense that the students look great. They're told specifically, they're ordered not to complain to tourists. The tourists, they want to say, they say, hey, what's your name? And so on. They say the students say, sir and ma'am to the tourists. They put on parades. They look great. I mean, they're, I love that. I'm a workout fiend, as the judge pointed out. I mean, I've shared the same weight rooms, pools, whatever, with these students for years. So they all work. They have to pass a so-called PRT, physical readiness test, every semester. So they're in shape. I mean, go to any college campus. Where are you going to see 4,000, 4,500, now we're up to close to 4,500, really attractive young people? They're not fat, they're not sloppy, their hair is cut, they're wearing spiffy uniforms that get, I mean, it's put on, it's all about the show. It's about looking good rather than being good. And then come to one of our parades. My God, you'll piss your pants. It's just gorgeous. So it's Disneyland, and Mickey and Minnie don't talk either. Right. So the students talk. It's all hat. To put it in Texas terms, it's all hat and no cattle.
Well, I'm in Texas, so I appreciate that. In fact, I'm right by Texas A&M University, which is one of those ROTC programs that sends a lot of officers.
That's right. Every land-grant university has an ROTC program, and a lot of the private ones do as well. Vanderbilt does. My younger son's at Tulane. They do. My older son is at University of Richmond. They do. So there's no shortage of ROTC programs. But to go back to our Texas connection, sure. In the movie Apollo 13, we say, Houston, we have a problem. Houston, we have a big problem with these service academies.
Is the Disneyland effect that you're talking about meant to make people think that nothing has changed and that it's still what it was 100 years ago?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, your tax dollars are paying not only for the $500,000 per student, they're paying for the PR firms that put out the PR. So, I mean, look at our recruiting videos. They're like SEAL movies. Which is another thing that our students have seen way too many of. I've said in print, maybe I even say in this book, I kind of lost track about where I say what. The interest of the brass is to keep. They don't have a clue what they're doing there. All right. This is a retirement job for these admirals. They spend 3 to 4 years, unless they're yanked out early. And I go over the superintendents who have been yanked out early. One lasted a year, one lasted 3 years, and so on. They themselves are not sterling examples of duty on our country. But assuming all goes well, they go into retirement. A lot of them, they want to become college presidents. And in fact, two superintendents ago, whose name is Carter, became the president of the University of Nebraska. And I read just yesterday that he's moved to Ohio State. He was the one who crowed in front of, in a public forum about finally having been able to fire Bruce Fleming. So, I do not wish that man well, and I'm sorry for Ohio State. But yeah, they pay, your tax dollars pay for the hype. And they're nothing at all. They're bright, shiny objects that are nothing at all inside what the outside shows to the rest of the world. If I say they're Potemkin villages, a lot of people will still understand what I mean. That Catherine the Great's subordinate Potemkin is said to have put up the facades of fake prosperous villages so that when her carriage rolled by, she would think that everything was fine with the peasants. So we talk about a Potemkin village, that's the service academies. They look great. And I can't, you can't go into them without thinking that they are. I mean, I say, my God, I must be stupid. It took me years to figure out what the problems were and why. And who gets to stay there for, this is year 36. Let me interject that I was reinstated, but the dean, who now thankfully is gone, forbid me to teach. So I don't teach. I haven't taught the last 5 years. So, but what have I done during that time? I've written 6 scholarly books. I encourage you to read them. They're Google Bruce Fleming. The publisher is Routledge, which is an Anglo-American publisher. Mm-hmm. And then this new Naval Academy book. But yeah, they're all surface. They're all surface.
Do you think that will change, or that you will be able to teach again someday?
Unclear. I've been turning that over in my head. They have to. They appealed their complete loss. So, and it's contingent on this appeal that they can keep me out of the classroom. So they are going to lose their appeal. It was just because this dean didn't want to admit defeat. But he's gone. He's gone. And like I say, we have a new superintendent, maybe as a woman, they're both women. The new dean and the superintendent are women. And they might just say, oh my God, this was boys, throwing testosterone at each other. Let's stop this nonsense. It's possible. But so I've had to actually run the film for myself of, would I be willing to go back into the classroom? I don't know, because I certainly don't trust the administration, and increasingly I don't trust the students. I thought I did. I love the students, and then you get these, snakes in the grass, and who are being encouraged by the administration. A lot would have to change for me to be comfortable with that. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I know you said that one Chinese student actually was upset that you pronounced his name wrong and brought dishonor to his family.
Yes, that was one of the accusations that the administration brought against me. I mean, it's a public record, this hearing, and it's mordantly amusing to me how ridiculous the accusations were. There was this kid with the one who was uncomfortable because I explained, because I said sex in the hall, for God's sake. Of course, you should be having sex in the hall. And also because I explained a sex change operation. The same kid, they said, that was topic A at the time. Then President Trump said, I'm not paying for this stuff. And one day in class, I don't know, there was a connection to a story we were reading. I can't even remember what it was. And one kid says, hey, sir, what is the sex change operation? I said, really? You don't know? No. So that's what professors do. We answer questions. We explain. So I did. That was this kid, the 16-page kid, said that was pornographic, or his parents said it was pornographic. He wrote me an email, incidentally, this kid, saying how much he was looking forward to having me as a professor the following semester. This is the one who, was used. So he was exhibit 1 and the largest exhibit. But then there was this Chinese kid, whom I completely did not remember. And I'm not even sure I believe that this happened because I have a very good visual memory. He claimed that I had purposely mispronounced his name, and that brought dishonor on his family. And the judge kind of looked at him and, what are you supposed to do with that? I mean, we're not in China. How do you know that? I don't think it's likely that Professor Fleming went out of his way to purposely. I mean, I've had many Asian kids that I love and who love me. That just kind of passed, he made the assertion. And then there was the one, the administration really liked this. They made this sound like a Me Too accusation, unwanted touching. I thought, what the holy hell are you talking about? It was that some guy, I make them do the presentations, which means I sit in the circle of seats with them, with the students. So the way they sit is they get kind of attached to their own places. It's kind of sweet to watch. So there was always the same empty spot. So that's where I'd go sit when I had one of the students giving a presentation. And it was always the same guy to my right and always the same guy to my left. So sometimes I'd give them a pat on the back when I sat down because they could be scared by, I'm big and I'm loud and I'm the professor. What is he doing sitting right next to me? Mm-hmm. So I'd pat him on the back. The accusation was that I had patted this one kid on the back. So there he was sitting there looking spiffy in his whites. And the judge said to him, did you object or did it make you feel uncomfortable when Professor Fleming gave you a pat on the back? He said, no. End of story. End of story. Right? But the administration brought that as a legal justification for firing a tenured professor. It turns out we don't actually have tenure. That's another whole story. They say we have tenure, but we don't. So that's the reason. That's the reason why I had to go through the federal system. I'm a federal employee. Thank you to all taxpayers. My salary is paid by you. And my salary has been paid by you for the last 5 years to write these 6 scholarly books. So I hope you appreciate them.
2 more questions. First
Sir.
of all, have you received any repercussions at this point for writing this book, and do you expect to?
Well, it's too recent, and as I say, it's in the middle of a turnover. So, what can they do? They fired me, and I'm still in legal proceedings with them with their appeal. I didn't explain that a judge issued his ruling that was in 2019. And they appealed, but the way appeals work in the MSPB system, the Merit Systems Protection Board, which is this federal internal court system, the way it works is that the appeal goes to, I don't ever have to show up in front of a judge again. It's a written appeal to a panel of three members. And at the time, that had 1 out of 3 members whose term expired. So for years, there were 0 members. Now there are 3 again, but they're dealing with a backlog of 3,000 to 4,000 cases. So I'm stuck somewhere in the backlog. So they could lose. They are going to lose because, the judge zeroed out every single one of their assertions, every single one. There was nothing left on the table, and there was nothing wrong with it procedurally and so on. So they're going to lose. What can they do to me more? They've already fired me. Okay. I mean, what are they going to do? They've tried letters of reprimand. They've tried angry letters. They've tried, and I'm not even in the classroom, so they can't say that I'm having a bad effect on the students. So I'd like to see what they'd come up with. So the answer is no. I mean, what can they do at this point? And if they did something for a book, that would be what they've already been punished for doing, which is way back at square one when this now departed dean denied me a pay raise because of this article that I'd written. I think actually that article was for the Washington Post. And the Office of Special Counsel intervened, and I'm not technically supposed to say that I won, but let me just say, so I'm not saying that. What I will say is that I was not required, my stump phrase is, I was not required to take it further. So they resolved it for me. All right. So they had to learn the hard way that you can't punish a professor for writing something you don't like. So I'd like to see them try it again. I mean, that would be great publicity. Go.
Sell a few more books.
Yeah.
Speaking of the book, where can my listeners get a copy of it?
Well, it's everywhere. It's in bookstores. It's on Amazon. It's comes out from Post Hill Press, which is distributed by Simon and Schuster. So should be everywhere. But Barnes and Noble website. A lot of people are going to be buying from websites. It's everywhere. I hope.
Better be.
Yeah.
It needs to be. Well,
I think it needs to be too.
Professor Fleming, thank you so much for being here today. It was a real eye-opener. And again, I have the utmost respect for individuals that are willing to take on authority and say the things that need to be said. You certainly fall into that category. It's a great way to live one's life. So thank you not only for being here, but for what you've done for the students at the Naval Academy and the other service academies as well.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Have a great one.
Okay.
You've been listening to the Tea Party Power Hour with Mark Galar. Y'all come back now. You hear?